Hello everyone, it's Luke. Today I'm back with another video. I wanted to wrap up my Don Quixote video because I just a couple weeks ago finished part 2 and I just had a couple thoughts on it and just wanted to give it a full, bit of my attention right now just to give my thoughts because it is one of the great books in the Western canon. So for part 2, I mentioned in part 1 how I read the book mostly on my phone, and that was the same for part 2, but I stopped reading it at work. I don't know, time to act more professional at work. But I was just, for this part, I read most of it over the holiday season when I was on break, on a trip, visiting family, and then that was when I started. It was kind of like before that trip, and then went on the trip, basically spent the whole trip reading it, and then I finally got home, and I think I finished the book January 2nd, so about almost 2 weeks to the date. And I just have some thoughts. I just have a few thoughts about this great book that I read. So basically, part 2 of Don Quixote was written 10 years after part 1. Today, they're both published together, both translated together, but that's probably the most important piece of context to have when reading this part, is that it is kind of like a sequel to the first book. And, Cervantes, he wrote part 2 10 years after Don Quixote, but during that time in Spain, after the publication of the first part of the novel, it got so popular and blew up everywhere. And since it was the 1600s, no one really, there was no copyright laws, there was no IP protection. So a bunch of other authors in Spain, France, and all around were writing their own sequels to Don Quixote. And this is also very important because this fact got to Cervantes. He was kind of halfway into writing the second part, and someone came up to him and told him about, a false apocryphal Quixote that had appeared in Spain. And the most famous one, and the one that Cervantes addresses in the book, was written by Alonso Fernandez de Avellaneda. And so Cervantes hears this, and you gotta know about this when reading part 2 of the book, because within part 2 of Don Quixote is famous in the world of the novel. Everyone has read basically the first part of the book. The first part of the book exists within the world of the book, which creates a very, very interesting meta-narrative structure to the entire book, and that is way more present in the second part than in the first. And so this meta-narrative that runs through, when you read it, you kind of also are getting a lesson in Cervantes, and what he thought about Don Quixote as a character, who he is, and the perception of his fiction in the world. And so when you read the book, especially the second part compared to the first, I don't know if you'll get this if you don't read a lot of books, but you can really feel a essence come through with each sentence, and a real context within every word. Every word, it just feels like it came from such a time and a place that you're able to reach through by reading the book and reading these words they're from thousands of years ago, or hundreds of years ago, but they just feel so real and lasting and relevant. And to keep going on a tangent into the relevancy of Don Quixote, is one of the most relevant books ever. It's been called the first modern novel, and I think it's because of this reason. I'm going to read a quote right now by González Echeverría. He, if you watch the first video, he has the Yale course on Don Quixote that first introduced me to the book, and that I've been kind of like watching alongside with reading just to help me understand it. He also wrote, I think, a introduction in the Penguin's Classic edition of the book. He says, Don Quixote has lasting appeal because he embodies a modern yearning to shape one's life to one's desires, and with the confidence to do so. And that's what I think I took away the most from the book on a first reading, and as like a relatively younger person. Like, every book now, yeah, it's, I read so many books about books or books about readers, or there's so many protagonists that are bookish and want to shape the world to their desire. I think like Gatsby, or Nick and the Great Gatsby, or Gatsby and the Great Gatsby, or one of those two, or some other modern Don Quixote examples I was thinking of while reading were like Ichiban from the Like a Dragon games, how he imagines the world as Dragon Quest. Ichiban's a very Don Quixote-esque character, and in like cinema, Walter Mitty, in that movie The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, I'd say he takes on a Don Quixote-ism in that movie in his journey to make his daydreams fantasy. And so, even in this way, we have books nowadays, self-help books. Self-help books are they would be the Knights Errantry novels if there was a Don Quixote today. A modern Don Quixote is a person that goes out, reads self-help books, and takes them all in and tries to reenact them in the world. If that isn't like Knights Errantry today, like, it is. And so, for those reasons, Don Quixote, I'd agree, yeah, it's the first modern novel. But reading it, you really just understand, like, it's just been in it. Like, so much of it has just transcended through all this time into all of our fiction that we've read. And I haven't really been reading books all my whole life. I've only really been reading books the past like 4 years, but upon reading this, it's kind of like I'm at like the end of the beginning of like my reading journey, it feels like. And people always talk about how part 2 is way better than part 1, it's way more enriching, and I agree. I feel like part 1 for me was like very much getting into the world, experiencing the novel. Part 2, I kind of just let wash over me. I just like let it just read, and and I knew it, like, after finishing, it took a lot of work to read part 1 for me, more work than usual for a novel. Like, I had to, watch those lectures, I did research, to make these videos, and when I read part 2, it's not that I didn't need it, like, watching those videos and enhancing your learning of the novel, like, that's a good thing, but, it was just me with my friends. That was what it felt like. It was just me kind of just hanging out with these people that I knew and people that I got to see again. And it was just incredibly affecting. I don't know if I have as much to say about part 2 as I do part 1. Technically, I mean, there's a lot of themes I could go into, but I just kind of wanted to come out and say that, yeah, it's like one of the best books I've ever read. I don't know if it's my favorite book of all time. It could be if I gun to my head, if I had to say it, but I don't know what I would say. There's probably a bunch more answers, and we can get into that, but that's all I had to say, really, about Don Quixote Part 2. I just kind of wanted to make this video to say, yeah, it's really that good. Like, it's actually that good. It's actually that worth it. And, if you find yourself wanting to read it, don't be afraid. Just, like, do not be afraid. Like, fear has stopped most people in the world from doing so much. And it shouldn't. It really shouldn't, because fear is just kind of like really one factor. You have a million factors driving you to what you want to do, your passion. But you're not gonna let one thing stop you. Don't. Just go out, read the book. Read the book, make the video, write the story, you know? And that's kind of what I got from Don Quixote. Just go fearlessly out into the world however you want, and you'll be fine. You'll probably be fine. And yeah, it's a pretty good note to end on. So don't worry, the goatie's coming. The goatee is coming. I know people have been begging and asking for goatee 2024 because, you know, games industry loves putting out their goatees like December 6th, December 7th. Whenever Marvel Rivals came out, day after goatee lists. Marvel Rivals review goatee list. But we don't gotta do that. You know, Oscars, Golden Globes, they're January, February. So expect the goatee video coming later, coming soon, you know. I finished all my goatee games. I just finished a goatee 2025 game the other day, but we will see about that. But yeah, we're gonna do goatee 2024. It's gonna come out soon, and that's really it. Thank you for watching, and you know, just go to the library, pick up a good book.